I think it's important to remember that in its origins, designating the end of June as a time for a gathering or a demonstration for gay pride, as it's called, began as a way to raise awareness for about the violation of human and civil rights that was happening in places like New York, when people gathered at bars or clubs and were harassed and sometimes beaten up by the police. So the most famous of those was the Stonewall Inn, and the riot that took place there when it was raided by police in June of 1969, and then the Pride Parade that was organized on its anniversary a year later. Now, as far as that goes, as far as needing to raise awareness about protecting the dignity and human rights of people, that's always been part of the Church's teaching. The Catechism of the Catholic Church says that people who experience same-sex attraction, people who identify as LGBT, must be accepted with respect, compassion, and sensitivity. And a letter from the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith from 1986 is even more explicit than that. It says, "It is deplorable that homosexual persons have been and are the object of violent malice in speech and in action, and such behavior deserves the condemnation of the Church's pastors wherever it occurs, because it betrays a lack of regard for human dignity." Right? So we have to call out injustice, and we have to push back against people who, even in the name of faith or the Church, would ostracize or marginalize, much less be hateful or violent in their speech and their action against people simply for their experience of same-sex attraction. So it's a good time to keep those things in mind, for sure. Now, of course, the way that Pride is promoted and the way that Pride parades in some places have been carried out, there are people with more diverse agendas than just raising awareness about human dignity. In too many places, I think people who want to express freedom and liberation from sexual mores or from oppression or from other people's expectations sometimes take that to an extreme and can be very provocative, if not obscene and offensive in the way that sometimes they dress or speak or act, or in the messages on signs that they carry or floats or things like that. So we have to be extremely prudent, thinking about participating in a public demonstration like that, because no one can control what someone else brings to a gathering like that, what someone else chooses to say or do. So I think the way that Pride celebrations tend to be carried out, at least in large cities, it's not an appropriate place for children. And it's a place where even adults could be scandalized if they're exposed to behavior that is deliberately provocative and that's immoral and obscene. That's not why everybody goes. It's not the intention of necessarily even the majority of people participating in an event like that. But the fact that it's a danger means we have to really be prudent, especially when children and young people are in question, and really shouldn't expose them to that. I think June can be an opportunity for us to have good discussions in our parishes about what the Church teaches in terms of sexual morality in general and homosexuality in particular. Courage has some resources that can assist in that, and there are other good resources as well. Just a chance for maybe to invite a Courage member, another person who's living chastely, to come and give a personal witness. A lot of people in our parishes don't necessarily know someone personally who's following the Church's teaching on this, and so their perspective and their testimony could be so important in achieving mutual understanding. It's an opportunity for us to look at ways that we can assist people in all walks of life to embrace virtue, and especially the virtue of chastity. And I think one thing that's often overlooked is the connection that the liturgy helps us to make in the month of June. First of all, June 3rd is the feast of St. Charles Luanga and his companion martyrs. They're the patron saints of courage, because what provoked the king's wrath and led to their martyrdom was their refusal to accede to his request that they be intimate in a homosexual way with him. So they set a real shining example of courage and of a willingness to stand up even to the most powerful person in their country, and refuse to violate God's plan for sexuality. And then, perhaps even more importantly, long before June was Pride Month, it's traditionally the month devoted to the Sacred Heart of Jesus. And the Sacred Heart is much more than just a logo or an image. The Sacred Heart is our kind of encapsulating the whole sacred humanity of Jesus, the reality of the incarnation, which means that he didn't come to save us at a distance or at arm's length, that Jesus took on our human nature. He has a real human body, including a real human physical heart. He felt fatigue, he felt hunger, he felt thirst, he felt the desires that God places in each of our hearts. The scripture tells us he was tested in all the ways that we are tested, but never sinned. He loved deeply with his human heart. He had human friends and a human family. He was sad when people died. He was angry when people were blaspheming. He was saddened when people left him and didn't listen. He knows what it's like to have our human emotions. He knows what it's like to see the beauty in people. He knows what it's like to live a chaste life. He knows all the desires of our hearts very well. I think the way to achieve that integration, which in the eyes of the Catholic Church is the very definition of chastity, is by repeating that prayer that has been part of devotion to the Sacred Heart for so long. Jesus, meek and humble of heart, make our hearts like yours. So it's a pretty sharp contrast between pride, which, I mean, there's a sense of pride in our dignity and who we are. There's a sense of owning our identity and our vocation. But pride is also a deadly sin. In fact, according to most spiritual authors, the deadliest of deadly sins. So the contrast between pride as a sin and meekness of the Sacred Heart of Jesus and our willingness to join ourselves to him, I think, shows us where we ought to put our attention and how we ought to help other people to encounter God's plan for them during the month of June and all throughout the year.